Commander Han Wu pressed his face against the cold metal of the transport ship's window. Below him, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it looked like just another star in the endless black of space. His hands were still shaking from the trial. 3 hours ago, he had been a decorated officer with 20 years of service. Now, he was nothing more than a prisoner being shipped to the edge of known space. The courtroom had been packed with reporters and military brass. The judges sat behind their high bench like gods deciding the fate of mortals. General Park had read the charges in a voice that cut through Han Wu like a blade. Failure to protect Colony 7, loss of civilian lives, disobeying direct orders. The list went on and on, Han Wu had tried to explain. The enemy had come from 3 directions at once. His forces were outnumbered 5-1. He had saved as many people as he could. But the judges did not want to hear explanations. They wanted someone to blame, someone to carry the weight of a military disaster that had shocked the entire Earth Defense Force. The defendant will be exiled to Frontier Station Kethra, the head judge had announced. There he will serve as a monitoring officer until such time as his conduct proves worthy of review. Everyone in the courtroom knew what that meant. Kethora Prime was a dead world on the edge of nowhere. Ships went there to disappear. Officers went there to die slowly and quietly, forgotten by the people they had once served. The transport ship's captain was a thin man named Li, who barely looked at Han Wu during the 3-day journey. The other passengers were criminals, failed soldiers, and broken people being sent to places the Earth's government wanted to forget. They ate their meals in silence and stared at the walls of their tiny cells. On the 3rd day, Captain Li came to Han Wu's cell. "We're here," he said without emotion. "Get your things." Han Wu gathered his few possessions, a change of clothes, his service medals, though they meant nothing now, a picture of his sister Kim Na, the only family he had left. She had cried when the military police came to arrest him. She had promised to wait for him to come home. He wondered if she would keep that promise. The shuttle bay was cold and empty. Through the massive doors, Han Wu could see Kethora Prime spinning slowly in the darkness. It was a brown and gray world covered in strange crystal formations that caught the light of its distant sun. No oceans, no green forests, no signs of life. "Your supplies are already loaded," Captain Li said, handing him a data pad. "Food for 6 months. Water recycler. Basic tools. Emergency beacon if you need rescue." He paused. "Though I should warn you, emergency calls from Kethra don't get answered very quickly." Han Wu nodded. He understood. This was not a posting. This was a death sentence with extra steps. The shuttle ride to the surface was rough. The planet's atmosphere was thin and full of dust that made everything look orange and dim. The monitoring station was a collection of prefabricated buildings, sitting in a valley between 2 crystal mountains. It looked like a child's toy left forgotten in a sandbox. Han Wu landed the shuttle and stepped out into air that tasted of metal and loneliness. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making him feel like he might float away at any moment. The only sounds were the wind through the crystal formations and the hum, the station's power generator. He spent the first week setting up his equipment and learning the routine of his new life. Every morning, he would check the deep space, sensors for signs of enemy activity. Every afternoon, he would send a brief report to Earth Command. Every evening, he would eat his rations and stare at the alien sunset through his small window. The reports he sent were always the same. All quiet in Sector 7, no enemy activity detected, no requests for support. He began to wonder if anyone on Earth even read them. It was during his 3rd week that he first saw the creatures. He was checking the perimeter sensors when movement caught his eye. Something large was moving through the crystal forest about 2 kilometers from the station. Han Wu grabbed his binoculars and climbed to the station's observation deck. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. They looked like wolves, but they walked on 2 legs like humans. They had thick fur that changed color from gray to brown to black as they moved through the crystal trees. Their faces were long and narrow, with bright yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. They moved with the fluid grace of natural hunters. There were 3 of them. They seemed to be scouting the area around his station. One of them stopped and looked directly at him. For a moment, Han Wu felt like he was being measured by an intelligence far older and wiser than his own. Then they were gone, disappearing into the crystal forest like shadows. Han Wu spent the next several days watching for them. He saw them again and again, always at a distance, always watching. They seemed curious about him, but careful not to get too close. He began to think of them as his neighbors in this empty world. The official files had said Kethra Prime was uninhabited, but the official files had been wrong about many things. These creatures were clearly intelligent. They moved with purpose. They worked together like a team, and they were studying him just as carefully as he was studying them. Han Wu found himself looking forward to these glimpses of the wolf people. They were the only interesting thing in his new life of endless routine and slow-growing despair. He began to wonder what they thought of him. Did they see him as a threat? A curiosity? Fellow exile in this forgotten place? He got his answer on a cold morning when the storm hit. The weather on Kethra Prime was usually calm, but this storm came from nowhere. The wind howled through the crystal formations like a living thing. The power generator struggled against the electrical interference. And through it all, Han Wu heard something that made his blood freeze. Screaming, it was coming from the direction of the crystal forest. High-pitched cries of pain and terror that cut through the storm like knives. Han Wu grabbed his emergency kit and headed into the wind. Without thinking, he found them in a clearing about a kilometer from the station. The 3 wolf people he had been watching were under attack by something that looked like a cross between a giant spider and a piece of living rock. One of the creatures was down, bleeding from terrible wounds. The other 2 were trying to drive off the attacker with sticks and stones. Han Wu raised his weapon and fired. The blast took the spider thing in what might have been its head. It screamed and fell backward, its many legs twitching in the crystal dust. The 2 surviving wolf people turned to look at him with those strange yellow eyes. For a moment, nobody moved. Han Wu stood with his weapon ready, not sure if he had just saved these creatures or made them his enemies. The wounded one was still bleeding, its breath coming in short gasps. One of the standing wolf people stepped forward. It was larger than the others, with scars across its face that spoke of many battles. It looked at Han Wu for a long moment, then slowly placed its hand over its heart and bowed its head. Han Wu understood. It was thanking him. He lowered his weapon and walked toward the injured creature. The wolf people watched him carefully, but did not try to stop him. He knelt beside the wounded one and opened his medical kit. The injuries were bad, but not fatal if treated quickly. As he worked cleaning and bandaging the wounds, he felt the eyes of the wolf people on him. They were learning just as he was learning. 2 species meeting for the first time in a moment of crisis and choosing trust over fear. When he finished, the wounded creature looked up at him with eyes full of gratitude and intelligence. It spoke a single word in a language Han Wu did not understand, but somehow he knew what it meant. Brother, the storm passed. The spider thing's body dissolved into crystal dust, and Han Wu walked back to his station, knowing that his life on Kethra Prime had just become much more complicated. He was no longer alone in his exile. He had neighbors, and whether Earth Command liked it or not, he was about to become their friend. The wolf people returned 3 days later. Han Wu was checking his morning reports. When he saw them approaching through the crystal forest, there were more of them this time. 7 or 8 figures moving between the strange trees that grew like frozen lightning in the orange soil. They walked slowly, carefully, like they were approaching something that might bite. The one he had saved was with them. Han Wu could tell by the white bandages still wrapped around its chest. It walked with a slight limp but seemed strong enough to travel. The others stayed close to it, forming a protective circle as they moved. Han Wu stepped outside his station and waited. His hand rested on his weapon, but he did not draw it. These creatures had shown him no hostility. If anything, they seemed as curious about him as he was about them. The group stopped about 50 meters away. The scarred one that had bowed to him stepped forward. It was clearly the leader of this small pack. It studied Han Wu with those bright yellow eyes, then reached into a pouch at its side and pulled out something small and round. It held the object up so Han Wu could see it, then placed it carefully on the ground. After a moment of hesitation, it stepped back and waited. Han Wu approached slowly. The object was a piece of crystal, but unlike any he had seen on this world. It was perfectly clear and seemed to glow with its own inner light. When he picked it up, it felt warm in his hands. He looked up at the wolf people and saw they were watching him intently. This was clearly some kind of gift, a thank you for saving their injured pack member. Han Wu searched his pockets for something to give in return. His fingers found the emergency food bar he had been saving. It was not much, but it was all he had. He unwrapped it and held it out toward the pack leader. The scarred wolf person stepped forward and took the food bar with careful hands. It sniffed at once, then took a small bite. Its eyes widened in surprise. Apparently, earth food tasted very different from whatever these creatures usually ate. The pack leader turned to the others and made a series of soft barking sounds. The injured one stepped forward and spoke in return. Its voice was deeper than Han Wu had expected, with a musical quality that reminded him of wind chimes. They were talking about him. Han Wu was sure of it. The way they glanced at him, the gestures they made, the tone of their voices. They were trying to decide what to do about the strange, hairless creature that had saved one of their own. Finally, the pack leader turned back. To Han Wu, it pointed to itself and spoke a single word that sounded like Koro. Then it pointed to the injured one and said something that sounded like Nemi. They were sharing their names with him. Han Wu pointed to himself.
Han Wu?
He said clearly. The pack leader tried to repeat it. Han, Wu. The sounds were strange coming from its throat, but recognizable. It nodded once, then turned to the others and repeated the name. And just like that, first contact became first friendship. Over the following weeks, the wolf people visited regularly. They never came too close to the station, but they would appear at the edge of the crystal forest and watch Han Wu go about his daily routine. Sometimes they would bring small gifts, interesting stones, pieces of crystal. Once a small creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a lizard, Han Wu began to learn their names and their relationships to each other. Koro was indeed the pack leader, an older female with wisdom in her eyes and scars that told stories of many battles. Nemi was her son, young and eager to prove himself. There was also Tala, an ancient female who seemed to be some kind of teacher or healer, and several others whose names Han Wu struggled to pronounce correctly. The language barrier was frustrating at first. Han Wu would point at things and say their names in standard. The wolf people would repeat the words back in their own tongue. Slowly, very slowly, they began to understand each other. Water was Mul in their language. Sky was Hanyul. Friend was Chingu. Han Wu found himself picking up their words faster than they learned his. Their language was complex, with subtle differences in tone that could change meaning completely, but the real breakthrough came when Tala, the old healer, approached him alone. It was early morning, just after sunrise. Han Wu was doing his routine equipment check when he saw her sitting quietly near the station entrance. She was much older than the others, her fur more gray than brown, her movements careful and deliberate. She held up one hand to show she meant no harm, then reached into her pouch and pulled out a small device. It looked like a piece of crystal shaped into a bowl, with metal wires running through it. She set it on the ground between them and began to speak. At first, Han Wu heard only the usual musical barking of their language. But as Tala continued to speak, something changed. The crystal device began to glow, and suddenly Han Wu could understand her words. "Can you hear me now, Han Wu, of the Sky People?" Han Wu stared at the device in amazement. "You have translators?" "We have many things your people do not expect," Tala replied. Her voice through the translator was warm and amused. "We have watched the sky for many seasons. We have seen your kind before." "Before? When? Long ago? Before I was born?" "Before my grandmother was born, Sky People came in great ships. They took our crystals and our metals. They killed many of our pack brothers and pack sisters, and they left and did not return. Han Wu felt a chill run down his spine. I'm not here to take anything. I'm here because my own people sent me away. Yes, Tala said. We know. We have watched you. You are different from the others. You helped Nemi when you could have let him die. You share your food. You try to learn our words. We're not like the sky people who came before. She paused, studying him with those ancient yellow eyes. Koro has asked me to speak with you. She wants to know why you are here alone. Why your pack sent you away. In our understanding, pack does not abandon pack unless there is great shame. Han Wu found himself telling her everything. It's about Colony 7, about the trial, about the way his own people had turned him into a scapegoat for a military disaster he could not have prevented. Tala listened without judgment, occasionally, asking questions that showed she understood military tactics better than he had expected. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Your pack abandoned you for trying to save lives, she said finally. Among my people, this would be considered madness. A leader who saves lives is honored, not cast out. My people see things differently, perhaps. Or perhaps your people are afraid of leaders who put honor before politics. She stood up, her movement still graceful despite her age. Koro has decided, if you wish it, you may run with our pack. It's not as sky people, but as Han Wu who saved Nemi. Han Wu who shares food. Han Wu who learns our words. Han Wu felt something tight in his chest, loosen for the first time in months. Wait, would that mean it means you would have family again? It means when the great hunting season comes, you would hunt with us. When enemies threaten, you would fight beside us. When the pack mourns, you would mourn with us. When the pack celebrates, you would celebrate with us. She picked up the translator device and tucked it back into her pouch. Think about it, Han. Wu of the sky people. Your old pack cast you out. Perhaps that only means you were meant to find a new one. As she walked away, Han Wu stared out at the crystal forest where his new friends lived. For the first time since his exile began, he felt something that might have been hope. His reports to Earth Command grew shorter. All quiet in Sector 7. He wrote, but it was not quiet at all. Every day brought new discoveries, new friendships, new possibilities he had never imagined. Earth had forgotten him, but the wolves remembered him every day. Maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Maybe it was more than enough. Maybe it was everything he had been looking for his whole life without knowing it. The pack was waiting for his answer. And deep in his heart, Han Wu already knew what that answer would be. Han Wu was teaching Nemi how to use the radio when the deep space sensors started screaming. The young wolf person had been fascinated by human technology. Every day for the past month, he had come to the station to learn about computers, communications, and the strange devices that kept Han Wu connected to the distant stars. Today was supposed to be a simple lesson about radio frequencies. Instead, Sensor Array was painting a picture that made Han Wu's blood turn cold. What is that sound? Nemi asked, his ears flattening against his head as the alarm continued. To wail. Han Wu was already at the main console, his fingers flying over the controls. The readings were clear and terrifying. 53 ships had just jumped into the outer system. Big ships, warships, they were moving in formation toward Kethra Prime with the steady purpose of a military fleet. Trouble, Han Wu said. Big trouble. He activated the long-range scanner and waited for the computer to identify the ships. When the results came back, his worst fears were confirmed. The designs were hegemony, the most aggressive military force in this part of the galaxy. They conquered worlds for sport and enslaved entire species for profit. Nemi. Han Wu said carefully, I need you to go get Koro and Tala, right now. Tell them the Sky Hunters are coming. The young wolf person's eyes went wide. Sky Hunters was what the pack called the bad humans who had raided their world generations ago. Are you sure? I'm sure. They'll be here in 3 months, maybe less. Ain't Nemi. Ran from the station faster than Han Wu had ever seen him move. Within hours, the entire pack had gathered in the crystal forest near the station. Han Wu could hear them howling in the distance. their voices carrying messages across the valleys and mountains. Other packs were answering. The whole planet was talking. Koro arrived with Tala and a dozen other pack leaders Hanwoo had never met. They were larger than the local pack, with more scars and a harder look in their eyes. These were the war leaders, the ones who had fought the Sky Hunters. "Before, show us," Koro said without greeting. Her voice through the translator was sharp and direct. Hanwoo led them to the sensor display. The holographic image showed the hegemony fleet moving through space like a swarm of angry insects. Each ship was marked with its class and armament: battleships, cruisers, troop transports, atmospheric fighters. "They have enough firepower to burn this entire world," Hanwoo explained. "They're not coming to trade or explore. They're coming to take everything valuable and kill anyone who gets in their way." An older pack leader with silver fur stepped forward. "How long do we have?" 3 months, maybe 2.5 if they push their engines hard. "And your sky people, will they come to help?" Hanwoo had been dreading this question. He activated his communication array and sent an emergency message to Earth Command. Priority 1. Immediate response required. He waited. The response came 6 hours later. Hanwoo read it twice before he believed it. Request denied. Kethra Prime is outside our area of responsibility. Cease all military activity immediately. Return to monitoring duties only. Hanwoo stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. When he looked up, he saw that all the pack leaders were watching him. "They're not coming," he said quietly. "Then we fight alone," Koro said. "As we have always fought." "You don't understand," Hanwoo said. "I've seen what the hegemony does to worlds like this. They have weapons that can crack mountains, ships that can burn forests from orbit. You can't fight them with spears and stones." "What do you suggest?" Tala asked. Hanwoo looked at the sensor display again. 53 ships. Thousands of soldiers. Advanced weapons and armor. Against a planet full of wolf people who had never developed spaceflight, the tactical situation was impossible. But Hanwoo had learned something important during his time with the pack. Sometimes impossible situations were the only ones worth fighting. "We make them pay," he said. "We can't win, but we can make victory so expensive that other species will think twice before attacking worlds like this." Over the next week, Hanwoo worked with the pack leaders to develop a defense plan. It was unlike anything he had ever attempted. Traditional military doctrine was useless here. Instead, he had to think like a wolf. The pack bond was the key. Hanwoo had learned that the wolf people could communicate across vast distances using their howling. It was not just noise. It was a complex language that could coordinate actions across entire continents. What looked like primitive behavior was actually the most sophisticated command and control system Hanwoo had ever encountered. "We turn the whole planet into a fortress," he explained to the assembled pack leaders. "Every cave system becomes a bunker. Every forest becomes a kill zone. Every pack becomes a military unit." The wolf people had been digging tunnels for thousands of years. Their underground cities were vast and complex, with passages that connected distant territories. Hanwoo showed them how to turn these tunnels into supply lines and escape routes. He taught them to create hidden weapons, caches, and communication posts. But they needed more than hiding places. They needed weapons. Hanwoo's mining equipment became a bomb factory. The charges he had been using to extract her samples could be modified into explosives. The surveyor drones could be turned into kamikaze attackers. Even the station's power cells could be rigged to explode if the situation became desperate. Nemi proved to be his best student. The young wolf person had a natural talent for understanding human technology. He learned to program the drones, set timers on explosives, and operate the communication systems. More importantly, he could teach other wolf people what he had learned. "You think like a sky person, but fight like pack," Nemi told him one evening as they worked on a batch of improvised grenades. "It is a strange combination. Strange times need strange solutions," Hanwoo replied. The defense preparations took on a life of their own. Packs that had been enemies for generations began working together. The Howling Network carried tactical information across the planet. Wolf people who had never seen advanced technology were learning to use human weapons. But the most important, Change was in Han Wu himself. The pack had not just adopted him, they had changed him. He was no longer thinking like a human soldier following orders. He was thinking like a pack brother, protecting his family. The Earth Defense Force had trained him to fight for abstract things like duty and honor. The wolf people had taught him to fight for something much more powerful: love. 2 months into the preparations, Han Wu received another message from Earth Command. This one was even shorter than the first. You are operating outside authorized parameters. Cease all military activity immediately or face court-martial. Han Wu looked at the message for a moment, then forwarded it to his personal files. Someday, if he survived what was coming, historians might want to know how Earth had abandoned an entire world to save face. Then he went back to work. There were still weapons to build, tactics to teach, and defensive positions to prepare. The hegemony was coming whether Earth approved or not, and when they arrived, they would find that this forgotten world had teeth. The pack was ready to fight. More than ready. They were eager to show the galaxy what happened when someone threatened their family, even if that family included a strange, hairless creature who had fallen from the sky and decided to call them home. The howling began that night. Not the communication howling Han Wu had grown used to, but something deeper and more primal. The sound of wolves preparing for war. The sound of a pack declaring that they would not go quietly into the dark. Han Wu stood outside his station and listened to the voices of his adopted family echoing across the crystal forests. In 6 weeks, those voices would be joined by the roar of enemy engines and the crash of weapons fire. But tonight, they were the only sound in the universe that mattered. The pack was ready. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for what the pack had become. The hegemony fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning, when the twin suns cast long shadows across the crystal forests. Han Wu was in the underground command center when the first ships appeared in orbit. The wolf people had dug this bunker deep beneath the mountains, connecting it to tunnel networks that stretched across 3 continents. From here, he could coordinate the defense of an entire world. "They're here," Nemi reported from the sensor station. His voice was steady, but Han Wu could see the tension in the young wolf person's shoulders. 51 ships. 2 of the big ones didn't make the journey, Good Koro said from her position at the communication array. The galaxy is already a better place. The hegemony commander began broadcasting immediately. His message was simple and brutal. Surrender in 24 hours or face complete destruction. Any resistance would be met with orbital bombardment. Any survivors would be enslaved. Han Wu listened to the message and smiled grimly. The commander was used to easy victories against frightened primitives. He had no idea what was waiting for him on Kethra Prime. "Let them land," Han Wu said. "Let them think this will be simple." The first wave came at dawn the next day. Atmospheric fighters screamed down from orbit, their weapons lighting up the sky. They targeted the major crystal formations, thinking they were destroying cities. Instead, they were simply giving the wolf people advance warning of where the main assault would begin. The real cities were underground. The real defenses were hidden. And the real enemy was already moving through tunnels toward the landing zones. The hegemony. Dropships came down in the Great Valley, a wide stretch of open ground that looked perfect for establishing a base camp. General Voss, the invasion commander, clearly believed he was dealing with Stone Age savages who would break and run at the first sight of modern weapons. He was wrong. The first mistake the hegemony made was landing in formation. Their ships were packed together for mutual support, which made them perfect targets for the mining charges Han Wu had placed throughout the valley. When the explosions began, they destroyed 6 ships immediately and damaged a dozen more. The second mistake was sending out patrols in straight lines. The wolf people had been hunting in these forests for thousands of years. They knew every hiding place, every shadow, every path that could hide an ambush. The hegemony soldiers never saw them coming. But the third mistake was the worst one. Voss assumed he was fighting a conventional war against a conventional enemy. He had no understanding of what he was really facing. The wolf people fought like their name suggested. They struck without warning, killed quickly, and disappeared before their enemies could respond. But more than that, they fought as a single organism. The pack bond meant that every warrior on the planet knew where every enemy was located. When one pack made contact, a dozen others would move to support them or cut off retreat routes. The hegemony had superior weapons, but the wolf people had perfect information. For 3 weeks, General Voss found himself fighting ghosts. His soldiers would advance on what looked like empty ground, only to have the earth explode beneath their feet. His supply convoys would vanish between one checkpoint and the next. His communications posts would go silent without any sign of attack. The casualty reports were devastating. The hegemony had expected to lose perhaps 50 soldiers in the entire campaign. Instead, they were losing 50 soldiers every day. Experienced veterans were refusing to go on patrol. Equipment was breaking down faster than it could be repaired. Morale was collapsing. Han Wu watched the battle unfold from his command center, coordinating attacks and moving supplies through the tunnel network. But he knew the mathematics of war. Every day they held out cost wolf people lives. Every tactical victory was paid for with the blood of his pack brothers and pack sisters. The defenders were taking casualties too. Tala was killed when a hegemony fighter bombed her medical station. 3 entire packs were lost when they tried to stop a tank column in the southern desert. The young ones were dying alongside the veterans, their bright futures cut short by weapons they had never seen before, but they did not break. They did not surrender. They howled their defiance across the crystal forests and fought. With the fury of creatures defending their home, General Voss became obsessed with finding and killing the human who had turned his easy conquest into a nightmare. He knew from captured equipment that Earth technology was being used against him. He knew that someone with advanced tactical knowledge was coordinating the defense. "Find me this human," he ordered his intelligence officers. "Find him and bring me his head. This war ends when he dies." The intelligence was good. Too good. Within a week, the hegemony had located the command center and was moving every available soldier toward the mountain complex. Han Wu watched them coming on his sensors and knew his time was running out. "We have to evacuate," Nemi said, looking at the tactical display. "There are too many of them, no," Han Wu said quietly.
Ow.
"This is where we make our stand." Koro looked up from her communication station. "The other packs can be here in 6 hours. Too late. They'll be in the tunnels by then." Han Wu studied the approaching forces. Thousands of soldiers. Heavy weapons. Explosives designed to collapse underground structures. "Besides, we need the other packs to keep fighting after we're gone." "After we're gone?" Nemi asked. Han Wu walked to the center of the command room where a large device sat covered by a tarp. He pulled the covering away to reveal his transport shuttle, its cargo bay packed with every piece of explosive material they had left. "I'm going to ram their command ship," he said. "Take out their leadership and give the planet a chance to keep fighting." The room went silent. Even the constant chatter of the communication arrays seemed to fade away. "That's suicide," Nemi said. "Yes, but it's also victory." Han Wu began the startup sequence for the shuttle. The hegemony came here, expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they've lost thousands of soldiers and dozens of ships. When word spreads through the galaxy, other species will know that there's a price for attacking peaceful worlds. Koro stepped forward. "You are Pack. Pack does not abandon Pack." "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm doing what Pack brothers do. It's protecting my family." The sound of explosions echoed through the tunnels. The hegemony forces had reached the outer defenses. Soon they would be breaking down the doors of the command center itself. Han Wu sealed himself into the shuttle cockpit and started the engines. Through the small window, he could see his pack family watching him. Nemi had tears in his yellow eyes. Koro stood straight and proud, her hand over her heart in the gesture of respect. The hangar doors opened, revealing the crystal forest above. Enemy fighters were already moving to intercept him, but they were too slow. The shuttle burst from its hiding place like a missile shot from a bow. Han Wu aimed for the largest ship in orbit, the massive battlecruiser that served as General Voss's flagship. The enemy tried to stop him with defensive fire, but the shuttle was small and fast and driven by a pilot who had nothing left to lose. As he approached the target, Han Wu activated the communication system one last time. His voice carried across every frequency, reaching every ship in the hegemony fleet. "This is Commander Han Wu of the Earth Defense Force. I died for my pack. Remember that. Remember us all." The explosion lit up the sky like a new sun. The hegemony flagship broke apart in a shower of metal and fire. General Voss and his entire command staff died in an instant, along with the human who had taught an entire world how to fight. But in the crystal forests below, the howling continued. The pack remembered their sky brother, and they would make sure the galaxy remembered him too. The explosion that killed Han Wu was seen across 3 star systems. Captain Rico Voss, the general's younger brother, took command of what remained of the hegemony fleet. 37 ships still floated in orbit around Kethera Prime, but their crews were broken and afraid. The easy conquest had become a costly nightmare that would haunt their military records forever. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the ground forces are requesting immediate evacuation. Morale has collapsed completely." Rico stared at the debris field where his brother's flagship had been. Thousands of experienced soldiers dead, dozens of ships destroyed or damaged. For what? A world full of primitives who refused to know their place in the galaxy. "Pull back to minimum safe distance," he ordered. "Prepare for orbital bombardment. We'll burn this entire world to ash." But as the surviving ships moved into bombardment formation, something unexpected happened. Fleets began jumping into the system. Ships from a dozen different species, all broadcasting the same message. "This world is under our protection. Any further attacks will be considered an act of war." The Villani Alliance had been born in the 3 weeks since the invasion began. Word of Han Wu's sacrifice had spread through the frontier territories. Faster than any government communication, species that had never trusted each other were suddenly working together. United by the story of a human who had died defending strangers, Rico found himself facing the combined fleets of the Zentari Republic, the Free Traders Consortium, and a half-dozen smaller powers, ships that individually could not challenge the hegemony's military might. But together outnumbered his remaining forces 3-1. "This is Captain Rico Voss of the hegemony's Second Fleet." He broadcast on all frequencies. "You are interfering with a legal military operation." The response came from Admiral Zara of the Zentari Republic. "This is no longer a military operation, Captain. This is a massacre, and it ends now." Rico looked at his tactical display. Even damaged, his ships probably had enough firepower to win a direct confrontation, but the cost would be enormous. The political consequences would be even worse. The hegemony ruled through fear and the perception of unstoppable strength. A retreat from Kethera Prime would show the galaxy that they could be beaten. It would encourage every oppressed world to resist. It would mark the beginning of the end for their empire. But the alternative was a war that would consume half the known galaxy. "All ships," Rico said finally, "prepare for hyperspace jump. We're going home." The hegemony fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of their ambitions and the memory of their defeat. But the real victory was only beginning. The surface of Kethera Prime, Nemi stood in the ruins of what had been the Great Valley. The hegemony landing zone was now a crater filled with twisted metal and broken dreams. Scavenger teams were already picking through the debris, salvaging weapons and technology that would help defend the world against future attacks. "Sky Talkers say more ships are coming," Koro reported, using the Wolf People's term for radio. "Communications. Friendly ships this time. They want to help us rebuild." Nemi nodded, but his attention was focused on the small memorial they had built at the edge of the crater. It was made from crystal fragments and pieces of Han Wu's destroyed shuttle. Nothing fancy or elaborate. It's just a simple marker to show where a friend had fallen. "He said we would make them pay," Nemi said quietly. I don't think he knew how much. The cost of the hegemony's defeat at Kethera Prime went far beyond the ships and soldiers they had lost. Within months, rebellion broke out on a dozen worlds. Species that had submitted to hegemony rule began to remember that they had teeth and claws of their own. The story of Han Wu spread like wildfire through the frontier territories. not the official version that Earth Command eventually released. Full of sanitized language about tactical errors and communication failures, the real story. The one the wolf people told in their howling songs and the other species repeated. In their own languages, a human had been cast out by his own people for trying to save lives. He had found a new family among strangers. When those strangers were threatened, he had died protecting them. Not for money or glory or political advantage, simply because they were family. It was a story that resonated across species lines. Every culture understood the concept of family. Every thinking being could recognize the nobility of sacrifice for those you love. The Volani alliance grew from 12 ships to 1,200 in the space of 2 years. Species that had been enemies for generations put aside their differences to build something new, not an empire built on conquest, but a confederation built on mutual protection and shared values. Earth tried to claim credit for the victory at Kethra Prime. They released classified documents showing that Han Wu had been conducting vital reconnaissance operations and establishing diplomatic contact with local populations. They even awarded him a posthumous medal for extraordinary heroism in the line of duty. But the galaxy knew better. The wolf people had recording devices. They had captured Han Wu's final transmission. They knew exactly why he had died and who had abandoned him. The truth spread faster than any government propaganda. Earth's attempt to rewrite history only made them look weak and dishonest. Other human colonies began to question why they should trust a government that would exile a hero and then try to steal credit for his sacrifice. Some colonies declared independence. Others demanded new leadership. A few even applied to join the growing Volani alliance, preferring the honest friendship of aliens to the calculated politics of their own species. But the most important change was happening in the deep frontier, territories where exploration ships ventured into unknown space. The galaxy was learning a new respect for humanity, not because humans were superior warriors or master politicians, but because they had the capacity to inspire others to become better than they thought possible. The hegemony never recovered. From their defeat at Kethra Prime, their empire crumbled over the next decade as subject. Species broke free, and former allies turned against them. Rico Voss eventually died in a prison cell, convicted of war crimes by the very people his brother had tried to terrorize. And in the crystal forests of Kethra Prime, the wolf people continued their ancient traditions of hunting and howling and raising their young to understand the importance of pack and family. But now, they also told new stories. Stories of the Sky Brother, who had fallen from the stars, and taught them that sometimes the greatest victories come from the willingness to sacrifice everything for those you love. The galaxy remembered Han Wu, not as Earth wanted him to be remembered, but as he truly was. A man who had found his true family among strangers and died protecting them from those who would do them harm, and in remembering him, the galaxy became a little bit more human, a little bit more willing to fight for the innocent, a little bit more likely to choose love over fear. The wolves had mourned their fallen brother. The stars themselves carried his song. 20 years after the Battle of Kethora Prime, Captain Li Deng stood in the Hall of Remembrance, on New Kethera Station. The space station orbited the crystal world like a jewel in the darkness, its gleaming corridors filled with beings from 100 different species. Humans walked alongside Zentari traders. Volani engineers worked with Carillion scientists. Children of mixed heritage played games that would have been impossible before the Alliance was born. But Li had not come here to admire the success of interspecies cooperation. He had come to see the statue. It stood in the center of the hall, carved from a single piece of crystal that seemed to glow with its own inner light. The figure was unmistakably human, but it was surrounded by wolf-like beings, all looking toward the stars with expressions of hope and determination. The inscription at the base was written in 12 different languages. Lai read the standard version: Han Wu, Sky Brother, Packheart, Unforgotten. He died so that strangers might become family. Impressive, isn't it? Li turned to see an elderly Volani approaching. The alien was clearly ancient, his gray fur marked with the scars of many battles. But his yellow eyes were still bright with intelligence and humor. "I'm Nemi," the old wolf person said in perfect standard. I was Hanwoo's student, his friend, his pack brother, Captain Li Dong. Earth Defense Force, Li replied. I'm here to negotiate a formal alliance between Earth and the Vellani Confederation. Ah, yes. Your government has finally decided we're worth talking to. Nemi's tone was amused rather than bitter. Only took them 20 years to admit we exist. Li felt uncomfortable under the alien's gaze. Everyone in the Earth Defense Force knew the story of Cathora. Prime. How a disgraced commander had single-handedly created the most powerful alliance in frontier space. How Earth had missed the chance to be part of something extraordinary because they were too proud to admit their mistakes. I've read the files, Li said. About Commander Hanwoo. About what happened here, have you? Which files? The ones where Earth calls him a hero? Or the real ones where they exiled him for trying to save lives? Li said nothing. There was nothing to say. The truth was too well documented to deny. Nemi walked slowly around the statue, his hand trailing along the crystal base. He used to stand right here, you know. This valley is where we first met, where he saved my life, where everything began. Reports say he went against direct orders. The reports say many things. Most of them are lies designed to make your people feel better about abandoning him. Nemi stopped in front of the statue and looked up at the crystal face. But you want to know what really happened? Why your governments are so eager to make treaties with us now? Li nodded. Come with me, Nemi said. Let me show you something your files don't mention. They took a shuttle down to the planet's surface, landing in what had once been the Great Valley. Now it was a memorial park filled with crystal trees that sang in the wind and fountains that reflected the light of the twin suns. But at the center of the park was something that made Li catch his breath. A second statue, this one smaller and more intimate. It showed a human figure kneeling beside a wounded Vellani, sharing food and water. This is where it really started, Nemi explained. Not with grand speeches or military strategies, with one person helping another because it was the right thing to do. They walked through the memorial gardens, past markers that told the story of the 3-week war. Li read the names of the fallen from both sides, Vellani who had died defending their homes, the Gemini soldiers who had been buried with honor despite being invaders. Hanwoo insisted on that, Nemi said, noticing Li's surprise. He said that even enemies deserved respect in death. It was a very human idea. We've learned to appreciate it. He stopped at a small building near the edge of the memorial. Inside, Li found himself in a museum dedicated to human culture. Art, music, literature, philosophy, all the things that made humanity unique in the galaxy. This is what your commander really gave us, Nemi explained. Not just military tactics or technology. He gave us the idea that family isn't about blood or species. It's about choice, about deciding to care for others even when it costs you everything. Li studied the exhibits in silence, poems written by human children on distant colonies, paintings that captured the beauty of Earth's lost forests, music that spoke of hope and loss and the endless search for meaning. The hegemony conquered. With fear, Nemi continued, they ruled through strength and intimidation. But Hanwoo conquered through love. He showed us that there was another way to live, another way to build something that would last. They returned to the space station as the twin suns were setting behind the crystal mountains. The Hall of Remembrance was busier now, filled with visitors from across the Alliance. Li watched as human children played with Vellani cubs there, laughter echoing off the crystal walls. So, Nemi said as they stood once again before the main statue, what will you tell your superiors when you return to Earth? Li thought about the question for a long moment. He had come here with a simple mission: negotiate trade agreements and military cooperation, standard diplomatic work. But he was leaving with something much more valuable: an understanding of what humanity could become when it chose love over fear. I'll tell them the truth, Li said finally. That Hanwoo didn't just save this world. He showed the galaxy what humans are capable of when they stop thinking about politics and start thinking about family. Nemi smiled, his canine features softening with approval. Good, because that's the only truth worth telling. As Li prepared to return to Earth, he carried with him copies of the Vellani historical records. Not the sanitized versions that Earth Command preferred. but the real stories told by those who had lived through the events. The story of a human who had been forgotten by his own people but remembered by strangers who became family. The story of how one person's sacrifice had changed the balance of power in an entire galaxy. Most importantly, the story of how the best of humanity wasn't found in its weapons or technology, but in its capacity to inspire others to become more than they ever thought possible. Back on Earth, the politicians would debate trade routes and military cooperation. They would argue about jurisdiction and sovereignty and all the other abstractions that governments use to avoid talking about real issues. But in the frontier territories, something much more important was happening. Species that had been enemies for millennia were learning to work together. Children were growing up with friends from dozens of different worlds. The galaxy was becoming a place where family was defined not by biology but by choice, and at the center of it all was the memory of a man who had died protecting strangers, and in doing so had taught the universe the true meaning of the phrase humanity. Fuck yeah. It wasn't about human superiority. It wasn't about conquest or domination. It was about the uniquely human ability to see family where others saw only aliens, to choose love where others chose fear, to plant seeds of hope in the darkest soil and nurture them until they grew into something beautiful. The wolves remembered their sky brother, and through their memory, Han Wu's legacy spread to every corner of known space, not as a conqueror or a politician, but as a teacher who had shown the galaxy that sometimes the greatest victories come from the simple decision to care about others. In the end, that was the lesson that mattered. Not the tactics or the technology, but the heart. The willingness to sacrifice everything for those you love. Even if they're not the same species as you, the galaxy had learned to be a little more human, and humanity had learned what it truly is. Meant to reach for the stars, the pack remembered. The stars sang, and somewhere in the crystal forests of Kethera Prime, the wind carried the echo of ancient howls that spoke of love and loss, and the bonds that make strangers into family forever, and always unforgotten.